Hello and welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful in the studio today with a fun new video series that I want to introduce you to. But first, for those of you who just follow my channel and watch, videos as I put them out, you know that I jump around to many different subjects and projects, and I don't always do one start to finish. So I thought I would give you a little update from the last video that I did, was showing how I was using my scraps from my gel prints. I started purposely trimming off a little extra onto the white parts, and then so that I could do something with them. So I will put a link down below if you're brand new to my channel and this piques your interest. I will put a link down below. This is just the last video that I did. And then I will also put a link to another video that I'm gonna be referring to. So I have been doodling on these scrap new pieces of paper that I have made from all those little bits. And I just wanted to show you from this shoebox, which you can see is full again because I've been doing some more gel printing. I probably only maybe used up about half of this box to begin with, and it's the size of a shoebox to make all of these. I have more than 20 pieces of paper now, and so I just keep this pile. In the evening I just doodle on them. Some of them I have almost to a finished point. Some of them I've done stitching with my sewing machine, some I have not. So I just continue working on this pile till I have some that I feel like I've done enough on, and then I can use them in a project. So I'm going to set those aside, but that's what I've been working on. I wanted to show you, this is one that I considered, finished enough. I did some doodling in between the negative space there, but I thought that was enough for this one. And then I went ahead and scanned it. So I wanted you to be able to see that at some point when I finish these, before I start using them up, I will scan some. Hopefully I'll get some really good, scans that can be digitally, printed. And then I can offer those as a kit or freebies or whatever. So this is the copy of one. And they're not the same. When you use metallic pens and things, they're not exactly, like the original, but they're still very nice to use for projects. So that's one that I've done so far. And then of course I had lots of comments. So I appreciate everyone who left comments on that video. And this is one idea that I had to do with them just because it kind of reminded me of a previous project that I had done. These were some of my hand painted papers that I have currently in kits, my Etsy shop. And these were just some scraps left over from those that I turned into these just little notebooks. These have fabric on the inside and some fun stitching with beads. So I may do something like this, but instead these were recycled book pages that have been gessoed so that you can write on them. But I think I want to make some that's just with the scraps of paper, like a junk journal, with little notebooks you can throw in your purse or whatever, backpack. So I'm going to do something similar, I think, to these. And I do have a video how I made these. So that's the one. I will put that as a link, just so that those of you who watched the last video and now want to know what do I plan to do with those papers, this is one of the ideas. And then again, these trifolds, there's also a video for these. They're just little, again, a portable little art thing that these have coloring book pages that can be removable. Some I have just some sketch paper and a sketch, a pencil in that kind of thing. So these are just two ideas of projects that you can do with those scrap papers that we ended up making. So I'm going to put all of this aside though. And today I wanted to introduce you to a new series that I'm going to start, and hopefully they will have some back-to-back videos. I don't know how many it will end up being. I think initially I may end up with, 2, 3, or 4 to get through what I've done so far. And then just as I learn new things, I will do a video, kind of updating and put it in the series. I want to say welcome if you are brand new. This is going to be a fun series to start in on if you're brand new to my channel. At least I hope so. I hope there's going to be lots of inspiration and fun tips and tricks and ideas and that kind of thing. So if you want to follow along on this and haven't subscribed yet, just click on subscribe to my channel and then hit the little bell so you'll get a notification when I do put a new video up. So this series is going to be about making stencils. I did a video a few videos ago that I had just learned how to make stencils, and I was so excited about it. I started doing them so that I would have some fun stencils for gel printing. And so I wanted to maybe get that more organized now that I'm getting a lot of them done, and break them down into tutorials more in depth than the one video that I already had made. I did make one that was using my Cricut Maker. That's what I am using to cut my stencils. There are lots of different ways to make stencils out of different materials, and so I may at some point do a video where I kind of cover that. But for this series, this was me learning to use my Cricut Maker a little bit more. And you know, I should first say that I am not affiliated with Cricut. I'm not advertising for Cricut. I just happened to have purchased a machine. I didn't know how to use it, and I've been trying to learn more and more about different things that I can do with it. And so I just want to share what I'm learning with you. Just like everything, there's always a learning curve for something new, at least for me. And I like to try to find the simplest way to do it with my limited knowledge. I'm not an expert in anything. I'm just learning as I go. And sometimes I'm figuring things out as I go. There may already be a video out there that I just didn't find, but sometimes I stumble onto things, but I've been having a lot of fun with it. And I think that I can show you, hopefully, because I'm a beginner, in a very simplified version, not having to be an expert in Cricut or Adobe Illustrator, which I'm also learning. Since I started doing these stencils, there were some that I wanted to do freehand. So I'm using different programs to get my design and then putting it into Cricut to cut it. You might find some inspiration even if you don't have a Cricut. You may have a different cutting machine that you can apply the same ideas to. So even if it's not a Cricut that you have, you might find some inspiration in design ideas in addition to the technical part of having to cut them out or work with a specific program. You may not want to have Adobe Illustrator or Procreate, or you may have a different program where you already know how to use that, but you can get a similar file that you can import into Cricut or hand cut. I'm hoping that in this series, even if you don't have the products that I'm going to be using, that you will find design inspiration, even if you're doing it by hand. So I'm going to go through, I created this binder of my own stencils, and I already have it filled up to this. And I decided to do it in kind of almost chronological-ish for how I was learning, because I actually really kind of stumbled on the idea to even make stencils when I was making other things with my Cricut, and what I ended up with negative space-wise, I thought would make a nice stencil pattern. So I kind of wanted to put a really comprehensive series together to kind of share just my learning and understanding of what type of stencils you might want to make. There are different types of stencils and masks used for different things. For me, I think I started out, I think there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 major reasons why I want to do stencils. And one of them, I think, which I'm covering the most in the beginning, the very beginner version, are background textures that can be used for gel printing and for mixed media art, that kind of thing, where you might not do a whole page of, stencil. I have done that for my samples using my gel plate, but you might want to just use a bit of it in a collage or, actually in your art journal spread, that kind of thing. So for that, you might want to do smaller stencils. So I want to cover how you can take your designs and just with one design, create it into different scale and size of stencils, depending on what type of project you want to do it use it for. And I had covered that in my previous video. That was kind of what I was sharing, was how I was scaling down larger stencils and also using the same design to create smaller ones. So some of this will be repetitive to that other video, but I want to go much more in depth. I've had people ask, can you do a little bit more detail? Because sometimes it's just easier if you've never done it before. I know it's frustrating when you watch a video and they'll cover parts of it, but not this one little part that you don't know how to do, or you didn't know how to convert that file, or that little thing. So I'm hoping I will cover everything. So I'm just going to go through this binder and just kind of show you what different things I'll be covering in this video series, stencil series, so that you can kind of see if there will be things that you'll be interested in, what I'll be covering. So when I first started out making stencils, these weren't even intended to be stencils. These were things that I was making on my Cricut, and it ended up being kind of a repeating pattern that I thought, well, that would make a nice stencil background texture for something. So I saved them. At that time, they were just made out of cardstock, so you don't even have to do this with the plastic that I have, the craft plastic that I'm using. This is just craft cardstock. And because you're using acrylic paint, at least I am, there's a plastic, element to that. And so as you get layers and layers on that, it's becoming very sturdy, because it's got layers of paint on it that you don't clean off because it's just on cardstock. So as long as you're using something that doesn't delaminate, that doesn't have layers, that could work for you too. So, this was just me making those little hole reinforcements, and this was what was left over. So it makes it's ended up being one of my very favorites. Everybody likes circles. You can do these in different sizes, and I think I'm going to open this just so that I can show you. I've put some of my favorite gel prints then of each one, just so as I'm flipping through here looking for a stencil, I can remember how it looks to use it on a gel plate. So that was kind of my idea for setting up this binder with my stencils in these just plastic sheets. These are from Avery. Just a tip, Pen and Gear at Walmart does, that's their store brand for things like this. They're super thin and I don't like them as much. It's harder to get your stencils in and out of a really flimsy one. So these are Avery, I believe, that are just a little thicker quality. You can also use these and hand cut them to make stencils. So, there's so many aspects to this. The next one that I did, again, without stencil plastic, just on cardstock, was this little rectangular one. And I can't even remember what these were that I was making out of cardstock. I don't remember at all. But I ended up with this stencil, and again, it's one of my favorites. So you can do, shapes, different sizes. So I think the first video that I'm going to do to go into detail will be using Cricut's basic shapes. If you don't pay for the all access subscription, you'll just have basic shapes. This one again is another one of, I'll call them my Happenstance stencils, that I was making, again, the reinforcements that fold in half. These are the reinforcements for the shipping tags. I created this design in my Cricut Design Space, but that's what was left cut out, and it made this stencil. So again, just out of cardstock, but it's a fun, different little pattern. So I've started, after I did these were gel prints that I'd made a long time ago. I was working on ones more recently. So I still had both parts, the first pull where you're taking it out of the negative space, and then creative ways to add layers to, have more intricate designs. So on a lot of these, I will have more than one sample on my sample side. So this is just going to be a good reference book to go through as I show the detailed how to make these. then you can see, you know, how they end up looking as stencils. So this is a circle one that I did again, and at first I didn't like it. I actually have two in here. I ended up, something about the size, I think I ended up squishing everything together a little bit more, closer together, so I didn't have as much negative space. When you see that on its own, you might not like how it turns out when you use it. And that's kind of the test to me. There were many times that I would make adjustments in my stencils if I didn't like it, how it came out the first time. And I wouldn't necessarily be able to see that on the screen in the design space. You can kind of visualize it, but until you actually use it in real life, you might find some little thing about it that you need to tweak. And that's the nice thing about using a cutting machine or something like that, or you've created your own design, because you can make adjustments to it and redo it. And some of them I've had to do 2 or 3 times. And that's why I wanted to kind of make this video series, so that I can share with you, as I was doing more complicated designs, the things to be aware of when you're designing a stencil, what you want to do or not do to have a successful end product. So this one, like I said, I didn't really like it so much when I did it, printed it the first time onto a gel plate, but I love it when you do multiple prints to make it look like bubbles. So that is kind of a fun thing. It turns out that I like it for that application. This one again was just a simple basic shape in Cricut Design Space, half circles, and then some, you know, hexagons to look like honeycomb. A lot of these are ones that you can find and purchase, you know, from other people that have done them. They're nothing complicated, but I will cover, you know, doing basic shapes, and then how you can maybe use those to create something more interesting. This again was not one of my favorites at all, but sometimes depending on color combinations, it might end up liking it more. I already know ways that I want to change this, and now because it's in there, I can easily adjust it. I did some that looked just like, you know, tile, to try to get a tile look with just squares, and then rounded squares to really look like tile flooring, kind of an idea. And then this was one that I actually used in the hearts, when I made the hearts for the wedding. This idea, but in a different stencil, but using kind of a patchwork of all my little stencils with this frame, these frames. So sometimes you want to do a more open stencil so that you can layer them and have different pattern behind that. Sometimes you want a more closed-in pattern. This is the one, it's not used yet because I recut it, but I think I made it a little bit wider, spaces in between. This is the one that I had used for the heart project that I did. So those are, you know, some of the simple ones. This is just some plus signs, but I just, you know, I love how the first pull, you know, when you're taking the first layer of paint up, and then as you add more colors, they just have completely different looks, but just with the same stencil. And then I'm going to get into, so that'll be like the simple basic free shapes that you can get on Design Space, and then creating using some more shapes that are available if you do the subscription, and these are just in the toolbar. I'll show, for those of you who don't use, you may have just purchased a Cricut, taken it out of the box and been intimidated like I was. I will go into just basic Cricut, how to use the Design Space, and show, because I did do the all access subscription, how you can get some more complicated shapes, and then changing those, combining those different things to make your own unique shapes. So, you know, this was just another little simple shape. So these just become a little more complex than the other ones. Again, the same thing here. And I should show, they just, you know, you can just get some really fun designs out of your own creation, and there's just a satisfaction about that. So again, just kind of showing how different they look depending on if you do the light color first or the dark color, opposite. Just with the same, with one stencil, they can look completely different. Again, another shape. So I'll just kind of go through these. Then I'll hopefully have some inspiration, finding different patterns if you're trying to, look at tile flooring or architectural patterns and that sort of thing. Changing the scale, this is very similar to this one. These two are very similar, a little bit different, you can see here, but they are just doing a different scale for a different purpose. Again, some more kind of tile patterns, and it'll be fun when I show you where the inspiration from these came from actually. You'll find that when you start making your own stencils, you see inspiration everywhere. These are some antique iron window, I think they were from windows, old window panels that I have hanging in my bathroom. And I just loved this pattern here is what I used to create this one. The scale of it is different, the shape's a little different. I want to be inspired by things and not maybe copy them exactly. This one is more of a copy, but it's this top one with circles. I don't know if you can see that very well, but you'll start looking at rugs and tile patterns and all sorts of things to be inspired to come up with different designs. And this again is one of my favorite ones. I think I started out with it this small, and it was a little busy to me for what I wanted to use it for, and then I enlarged it, and I love this. Is one of my favorite ones. It just has this really when you use metallic paint you can actually even get that kind of iron sort of look. Once you start and learning how to kind of put these two things together, you're going to come up with just some fun different designs. So I'm just going to kind of flip through these. These would be all of my more, not really complex, but more than just the basic. It's still the same type of process to get to those, but maybe there's a couple extra steps to get the shape that you want, that sort of thing. This one I had done, and I showed it in my previous video that I did, and then I realized I didn't like how far spaced out they were, and they aren't really evenly spaced on the stencil. I don't know what happened, but I didn't like it as much, so I actually readjusted that same one to be a pattern that I liked a little bit better. And this is just kind of a herringbone or chevron pattern. And then I got into more, this was inspired by a rug that I have in my laundry room, and just kind of taking some shapes and manipulating them, changing them. I'll show you, where you find these, because you're like, where do you find that shape, or how do you make that shape? If you break it down, you can see all the different parts of it, but how do you create it for your design using just simple basic shapes? So that'll be a fun thing. And then I got to a really kind of a filigree one that's super fun. I mean, I just love how those gel prints turned out. You might want to do some things that look like wallpaper patterns and that sort of thing. So these take a lot longer to cut out. With the machine, it even takes maybe an hour to cut it out. But to take something like this and then maybe take just a part of it and create a border with it, that kind of thing. And then we're going to get into the really fun, crazy things to me. So once I kind of got to this, part, I was starting to work on the wedding. And, one obvious thing to do was just letter stencils, starting with really just, basic lined up like this, to then creating some fun different arrangements of them that are more, you can customize with personal things on them. And these will be a good sampling of kind of the learning curve, space-wise and that kind of thing. So I'll cover in detail the things that I learned, not to do. These took me much longer than you would think to put these together. It looks so simple, but to get everything scaled just right and arranged on the page just right with the right amount of spacing between everything so that it looks good when it's actually being used there's, some tips and tricks to that. So these were all kind of practicing in that area. And then, you know, again, still just some basic shapes, but this whole section, which will be a video in itself, is all about using letters, alphabet, letters, fonts, different things like that to create different designs. So I call this one my wow one, because this is actually created with W's and O's. So, you know, I want to share how you can manipulate those kinds of things to create your own designs. Again, this is made with alphabet, with some alphabet letters in a different font to create this design. So just those kinds of things. This one here is the first one that I did using this design, but then I adjusted it, and so there will be some lessons, things that I learned, scaling it differently. You'll see how this is actually connected in a line here to get, which gives it a totally different look. And then again, breaking it up in a smaller version, but more like this design. So, you know, depending on what you want this to get this to look like, or what your end result, you know, wants to be, is kind of part of how you decide how you're going to design something. This I thought would be really great to print onto fabric. You know, it just has that kind of feel, you know, to me, of mud cloth, that kind of thing. So we'll do some of that using different alphabet things. And then all of these were done just with Design Space, or maybe just my word processing program to get the fonts that I wanted. So really no other graphic design program. These were all just done with really basic shapes. And so you can really, the sky's the limit to your, you know, your imagination's the limit. I did want to, because I'm learning Adobe Illustrator, and I wanted to figure out how can I manipulate shapes, take a basic shape and totally contort it into another shape without hand drawing it, really with the computer. So this is the only one I've done like this, was done with Adobe Illustrator. Again, I'm not an expert. There may be ways to do this kind of thing in Cricut Design Space. I have not figured it out yet, if there is, but I will keep digging. But I did this with Adobe Illustrator, but you may have another program that you know how to manipulate shapes to design something like this. Also, because of how large these are, you could even just hand draw these onto anything and cut them out by hand, this type of abstract. But I love how it turns out. I love how it looks layered. It's very graphic to me, kind of a graffiti kind of look. So that's the only one I've done like this so far, but I do want to do more, learn more there, and of course I will share as I find new things. This next section are ones that I'm calling asymmetric writings. So I have always wanted to learn how to do that, and so I will kind of cover what I learned as I went along doing some. This was actually kind of a quote, I think, that I did, where it is actually the quote, but it's written to where it's maybe not legible, but it really does say something. Where asymmetric writing is really kind of just could be scribbling to look like writing, but it doesn't really say anything. So this is kind of going that way. But it was my first attempt at using Procreate. I did not have Procreate until a couple of weeks ago. And so I really only know the basics, but I'm going to share with you what I'm learning as I go, because it didn't take much. I have very limited experience with both Adobe Illustrator and even less with Procreate, and I was able to make these stencils. So that's why I'm just really excited to be able to share this with you, because you can see I'm a beginner, and I was able to do these really, really quickly. This was a pretty quick learning curve. But again, I'll have some tips about size and scale and that kind of thing, and actually show doing it on my iPad. So I went from, you know, this first one, kind of doing it skinny, seeing how that looked, to doing it a little bit thicker. And again, this is really doesn't say anything, but it just has that, you know, scribbling look. But it's really fun. I love how when you layer these, you know, it has that graffiti look to it. So let me know in the comments if you see something that I've done and you're like, can you make sure you cover this part of it, or maybe after I finish all these, maybe you want part of the classes, the instruction to be how I got some of these gel prints too. So again, this is another one, even with thicker writing, same kind of thing, but just trying to play around with size and then print them out in different ways to get kind of a different look. And then this is, I love the look of Japanese calligraphy. I don't have any knowledge about it, so I don't think this says anything. It wasn't intended to say anything. It was just meant to make those marks and then see what I could get in some prints. This one I did make into a smaller one, and that will be one of my tips as I go through the instruction, and I'll explain that why when I go into the detailed thing. But there's just so many little parts and pieces and things to learn that I thought this introduction would at least kind of help me to have you put things in the comments that you might want to make sure that I cover in the detailed videos. So this is another one. We kind of went from the asemic writing now that I was kind of learning Procreate a little bit. My future daughter-in-law, she was like, you should try to make your doodles into stencils. And so that's what these next few are, were me kind of trying to do that. And I have a certain hand, like everybody has a certain handwriting that they do, or a certain way. I tend to be really small and detailed. That doesn't always work for stencils, especially when you're cutting them out with, you know, a Cricut maybe, and not like a professional quality machine. Not that Cricut's really good, but I can just imagine there are probably laser cutters, that kind of thing, that are just, even you can get really fine detail. So this was my first attempt, and then I was trying to play around with a different kind of style design, getting the negative space and the positive space, we'll call it, to be the right scale. And this worked out okay, but I still wasn't completely happy with it. So I kept trying, and then I did this one that has a little skinnier, you know, you can see more open space and skinnier lines. So I will go into how I did these, and then I did another one even more open. So, you know, just to kind of try to figure out how open, how thick of a line I need, what feels right, because doing it on an iPad and then getting it to this point are two different things. And these, I just decided, I'm trying to, as my samples, print, gel print samples, do a different variety, kind of just experimenting. And so these I did just with laying down white first, just to get a lot of contrast, but it's very simple, so that I can go and then with some metallic pens or Posca pens and do some doodling or coloring inside of these more open ones. So, you know, just kind of playing around. So I'll cover how I do all these hand-drawn doodle ones. And then the last thing, well, maybe not the last, because as I learn, I'm going to keep doing more, but this is one that I also had done where it's more of a mask. Some of these are more mask than stencil, and I'll kind of share what I understand to be the difference. But this would be truly a stencil and a mask, where I actually took a real feather, a real thing like this. This is this feather, and created my stencil, which, because it's an open, it doesn't have the little, you know, separations and all of the little detail. I did this more of what I would consider like an SVG file that's really a silhouette, just the outline. And then I also have the mask then, so that I can, I know you can't see these because they're clear, but so that I can lay that down and do, you know, paint over it too. You can do it either way. And then I did this one so that I would have a big open space that I could do my little doodling in, on a gel print. So again, there may be different reasons why you want to make your own stencils, and so these are just a couple of, you know, different applications. The other type of stencil that I haven't done yet, but I want to, and I'm going to share. These are not mine. These are Sean Petit's. She does, if you don't know who she is, she does mixed media art. She has a channel and website and all that stuff, and she has a lot of stencils that are really drawing, I'll call them drawing assist. And for someone like me who couldn't do this freehand, I mean, maybe if I practice, but I'm not skilled at that. She has these type of stencils to just help even herself to get the outline down, and then you create your art around it. And this is a floral one like that. So I'm going to call these kind of art assist stencils. And I would like to get to a point where I can do some of those because I'm not good at drawing. So I think that would be another different category also. So that may come in the future. But anyway, so that's what this series is going to be about. Again, please, if there's anything that you can think of that you wanted to learn how to do, even if I don't know how to do it yet, I will research and figure it out and then do a video about it. So I hope that you're as excited as I am about learning how to make more stencils using all kinds of things. So I hope you'll join me. Make sure if you haven't subscribed that you do so you don't miss out, because I'm going to get to the first video right away. So have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.